Welcome to the Arabesque Scissors Sewing Studio. Now in this video we're going to be making the next project in the Easy Cathedral window series. So this video takes what you've learnt where we made the mini cathedral pinny and applies it to an even more practical project. Welcome to the baby cathedral sachet. So this is a drawstring bag that's perfect for just holding a few notions, maybe some electronics, and it's also the perfect eco-friendly bag that you can make and give as a little gift. So if you're just coming to this as your first cathedral window project, this is still a really simple place to start. This is a simplified version of a cathedral window where we make just one window that features front and center on the project and is perfect for featuring a favorite fussy cut. What I love about sewing this project is it's really fast. You can make this in an hour or two. You can make it from scraps and it makes you look really clever, because if you don't know the secret for putting this together, then nobody can tell how you've done it. Now, if you love educational sewing videos that help you grow in your skills and give you the confidence to sew them yourself, I'd love you to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. Now, all the supplies that I'm using today are linked in the description below. So if you would like to sew along with me, grab a copy of your pattern and we'll get started. So let's run through what you're going to need to make this project. So you don't need much fabric for this again. Once again, this is a really good scrap busting project. I've got 5 different fabrics here that I've selected. So this is a really nice amount of fabrics to give you a good balance and not make it looking too busy, but also keep it really interesting and just help it really pop. So this is going to be the fabric for the front. I'm going to fussy cut the little mouse out of this one. This is going to be my contrast window and my drawstring casing fabric. This is going to be the back fabric, and this is going to be the fabric for the lining. So these are all from the Tilda range, and this is another favourite range of mine that I just love to sew from. Also for this project, you're going to need something for your drawstring, and you can use a whole range of things here. You can use a ribbon, you can use string, leather cord. I've got actually going to use some really pretty lace for this, so there's something to bear in mind. If you've got some lace that you've got lying around, this can be a really cute thing to use for a drawstring. I also recommend adding some woven fusible interfacing to the reverse of all of your pieces except the lining, and this is just my preference for when I sew with woven fabric. I like to add this to the reverse of all of this when it's going to be a 3-dimensional project that's going to be stretched and pulled as we sew it, and also needs some structure for when it's finished. And I also love adding some fusible fleece because I like my projects where possible to just have that cozy padded look. So these are both optional extras for the pattern. You can leave them out if you don't have them or you don't want to use them. You're going to want to print out at the end of the pattern your fussy cut window template. So just make sure when you print this that your scale square measures exactly 1 inch by 1 inch square. Then you're going to cut this out, then you're going to cut out the center window. Then you're going to fold this on the diagonal and cut out each of these little rectangles. And I'm going to show you how to use this so that you can achieve the perfect fussy cut. So I also recommend some pins or some binding clips. And because what we're using today is going to end up quite thick in the seams, I do recommend binding clips for this, just because these are really good at gripping a strong amount of thick fabric, and sometimes a pin just can't get through all of that and pin it accurately. So I do recommend a stiletto for this project, and this is really good for getting into the little tricky parts of the seams when we're doing the window. And if you don't have one of these, you can just use a small sharp pair of scissors that has a pointy tip. This is just great for getting underneath the needle where you don't want your fingers to go. I'm also going to be using some fabric basting glue. I've got my fine line glue tip here, and I'll link to all of these in the description below. Going to need a fabric safe pen and a safety pin or something to thread your drawstring through at the end. Now to use your fussy cut window, you're just going to place this on your fabric and pick a design that you would like to center in the window, and then you can just move it around and work out how you would like your picture to be oriented within this window. So I'm just going to pick this one down here. So just sort of play around with it until you are happy with how it's centered. Then you're just going to grab your pen and you're going to mark in each of these top dots, in each of these rectangles, in this dot, in this rectangle, and then you're going to join up what you've marked here. And then you can cut this out with confidence, knowing that you have the correct size and this is the perfect orientation for your project. So when you're ready to cut your project out, I do recommend that you cut this as accurately as you can, because at each stage of this project, the more accurately that you can sew it, the better that your result will be. So I do recommend that you use a rotary cutter and a ruler for these squares if you can. So we're going to start with our front background fabric here. And we're going to lay these out right sides up. So this needs to be length times width and length times width. So make sure that you have these oriented the correct direction. So then we're going to grab the squares for the contrast window. So just grab one of these and you're going to fold this diagonally in half, wrong sides together. So you grab your iron and we're just going to press that as accurately as we can. And flip it and give it a press on the other side. And set that aside and grab the next one. Now my pink fabric here actually has a little bit of an extra grain to it, because this is like a shot chambray that we've got here, and it even looks like it's got a right side and a wrong side. So I'm going to be a little bit careful here, because I'd like my window to have the grain of the texture showing here, all actually lining up across the window as we go. So that's going to affect the way that I fold it. So just make sure that if you've got stripes or some texture to your fabric that you would like to align in the correct direction, that you are paying attention to whether this all lines up the way that you would like it. So I don't know if you can see on the camera here, but when I fold this, the grain or the texture is actually going at 90 degrees to this one. So that just means that I'm going to have to fold this the opposite direction, and now it's going to work. So that's what you need to do if you can't get your stripes or the texture on your fabric to match up, then just fold it on the opposite diagonal. So now I'm just going to grab my glue and just glue baste each of these corners. Just a tiny little dab in each of these inner points on the rectangle. Now we're going to go back to our front fabric. We're going to grab each of these triangles and place the two inner raw edges with the two inner raw edges of each of these. So just lay them on there like that. and then the two inner edges of these ones with these top two inner edges. Now you can glue base this down again if you would like. So I do apologise, I forgot the very first step. So if you're going to be using the interfacing, you're going to fuse that onto the wrong side of each of these pieces. And while I'm here, I'm also going to fuse the interfacing onto the back panel. So just center that in the middle on the wrong side. So now we're ready to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste these inner two edges of each of these rectangles at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now you're going to lay out your 4 front pieces the same way that you had them before, and we're going to sew these together into pairs. So take the right hand one and place it on top of the left hand one, and take the bottom right hand one and lay that on top of the left hand one, and we're going to align these as accurately as we can, and then just put a couple of clips on here. So now we're going to take these to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch down both of these seams at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So now you're going to give these seams a good press, and then we're going to open this out and press this open. So you get right in between those contrast windows and just get that as flat as you can. So this is starting to get quite thick here, so we've got quite a few layers of fabric in the seam. So what we're working at is trying to get this flat. So just do the same for the top two rectangles. So now just lay these out the way that they were, with the smaller rectangles at the top and the larger ones at the bottom. And I'm just going to place these right sides together. Now getting this center seam accurate and matching exactly is not important, because we will be covering it with the fussy cut, but you are trying to aim for getting the edges of these triangles aligning. So just put a clip there and another one on this side. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch down this seam at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now give this a press. Now we're going to open up this center seam. So get right in there between all those layers and press this seam open. And flip it over and give it a really good press from the front. So now we're ready to add the fussy cut onto the contrast window. So this is where it's really important to make sure that your project is oriented the right direction. So we want the 2 smaller rectangles at the top and the 2 larger ones on the bottom. And you want to make sure that if your fussy cut is a picture that you want to face up, then make sure that this is facing the right way up. So just place this in the center of the contrast square here, and each of these points are going to align with each of these seams on each of these points. So at this point I like to just grab my glue again and then just put a little tiny bit of glue just inside of here, well within the seam allowance here, just to hold this all in place. So now we're ready to form the window that's going to enclose the raw edges on this fussy cut. So we're going to fold this folded edge of the contrast window back, and in the center of the side we want this to be folded back no more than about 3/8 of an inch. And then we're going to taper this as we come up to the point, taper this right down to the seam here so that the fold basically goes away to nothing. So you're going to be tapering this, and then as you come up to the other corner, you're going to taper that off to nothing as well. But what you really want to make sure is that you're actually covering up the raw edge of the point so that all of the edges of this fussy cut are enclosed inside this fold. And then as you come up to this edge, you're going to stitch right off the top of it and land with your needle down right in the junction of where those points in that seam are all meeting. And keeping your needle down, you're going to pivot and then fold back this edge and continue stitching down the very inner edge of this fold until you come up to this point. Stop with your needle down, fold back again, overlap all the edges so that no raw edges are showing, and stitch your way down until you come back to where you started. So this is where I do recommend using your stiletto or a pointy pair of scissors just to help hold all of this in and in place where you want it. So just take it slowly and you will be fine. So let's take this to the sewing machine. We're going to be stitching very close to the inner edge of this folded edge.
I want to be with you forever. Please? Would you come with me and run away?
So here we have the finished window, and I think you'll agree this is just such a charming little window and it really makes the fussy cut really pop. So now we're ready to fuse the fleece onto the reverse of this if you're going to be adding this in. So make sure that you're fusing this from the right side and that you've got the sticky side facing upwards onto the wrong side of your fabric. And while we're here, we're also going to fuse the fleece onto the wrong side of the back fabric. So we're just going to set these aside, and then we're going to get on and make the drawstring casings. So if you've got a right or wrong side, just have a look at your fabric. So now we're going to form a hem on each side of the short end of the rectangle. So just fold over 1/4 of an inch hem there and press it, and then fold it over a second time. And this is going to enclose all the raw edges as we stitch them down. So just repeat this for the other side. So just press under 1/4 of an inch hem and then press under another 1/4 of an inch. So just repeat this for the second drawstring casing. So now we're ready to take both of these to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along each of these inner folded edges. So just give each of these a press. And then we're going to fold these lengthwise in half, wrong sides together. So just give that a really good press. So one thing I like to do, if your drawstring is not staying in half, I'm just going to baste these two ends together to help hold them exactly where I want them. So I typically have one side of these that likes to bulge out a little bit more than the other one. And then I'll give it a little shot of glue in the middle and then pull these apart and get that to line up nice and flat. And you can set that glue with the heat from the iron. Now we're going to take both of these to the sewing machine and we're going to baste along these raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're also going to top stitch along the folded edge at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and this is just going to form a little frill. When the drawstring's all pulled up, it will have a little bit of a ruffle to it because there's an extra channel above the channel where the drawstring goes. Just give these a very quick press again. And now we're ready to attach these drawstring casings to the front and the back. So just double check on your front that you have this facing the right way up and that your little fussy cut is facing the right way up if you have a directional print. So take the raw edges of this drawstring casing and align them with the top raw edges of the front and center this so that there's an equal distance on each side. And then just grab a few clips and pop a couple of clips on to hold this in place. Then just repeat this for the back. Now if you've got a directional fabric on your back, just make sure you've got that facing the way that you would like. And then just grab your second casing and center the raw edges of that with the raw edges on the top of the back. Clip that in place. Now we're ready to take these to the sewing machine and we're going to baste along the raw edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now these are attached, we can actually assemble the pouch. So you're going to place the back on top of the front, right sides together. Make sure that the drawstring casings are both at the top. I'm going to clip these together. So now we're going to do the same with the lining. So we're going to place the linings right sides together. And if your lining has a direction like my print, then just make sure that you've got this facing the way that you want. And we're just going to clip this together on all three sides as well. So now we can take both of these to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch on three sides at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So just give your lining a bit of a press here. And if you've got fleece on here, you can't press this at the moment, but that's okay. So now we're ready to box the corners on this project. So once again, you're going to double check that you have the opening at the top and that you're going to be cutting out the bottom two corners. So we're going to measure 1 inch in from each of these bottom corners. And we're going to rule a little box and then just repeat this for the lining. So double check that your open side is at the top and then rule an inch box in each of these corners. Then we're going to grab some scissors and cut these out. Now, because we've cut these stitches here and these stitches are not reinforced, I like to take this back to the sewing machine now and just back stitch over each of these corner edges, just to make sure that when we open this corner up and start pulling on those edges, that those seams don't come undone. So now you're going to reach your hand in here and open up this corner that we've cut out, and we're going to align these two seams in the center here. So match them up. Now you can have your seams going opposite ways if you like, or you can have this the seams flat. I also like to tug a bit lower down away from the top edge, just to make sure that all of that is going to neatly meet up, and you end up with a nice square corner. So just put a clip on that edge and then do the same for the opposite side. So if you have clipped your seams one direction, make sure that they are facing the same direction so that you don't have your seam twisted. So line up those center seams here, really tug on these edges just to open that corner out nice and square, and put a clip to hold this together. And we're going to repeat this for the lining. So line up those center seams and clip that together. So now we're going to take these to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch along each of these edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've just realised that I didn't leave an opening in the bottom of the lining. So now I'm going to measure a 2.5 inch gap here on my lining, and I'm going to go back and just reinforce either side of this, and then I'm going to unpick this little center bit, and that's going to give us an opening to turn the bag through at the end. Okay, so now you can turn your exterior right side out and push out those corners. And then we're going to place that inside the lining, keeping the lining wrong side out. We're going to match up these top raw edges and align these side seams. So pop a clip on that and just come around to the other side and match up the side seams over here. And then just pop a couple of clips to align the raw edges of the lining and the exterior together. Okay, so we've got our opening at the bottom of the lining so that we can turn this right side out. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch around this edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to take off the table of my sewing machine because I've got a free arm sewing machine, and I'm going to be placing the arm of the sewing machine inside here, and mine fits really well, and it's just the perfect width to be able to sew around this. Now if you don't have a free arm, or your free arm is slightly too big, then you're going to stitch this above your sewing machine, and you're going to stitch on the inner side here, turning this as you go. So either way will work fine. just do the way that you can do with your sewing machine.
I want to be with you forever.
So now we can turn this whole little sachet right side out. So just reach inside the lining there and just start pulling gently on that exterior. So you're trying really hard not to tug too hard on the stitching on the opening because you don't want to rip it. If you've got any raw stray threads sticking out, you should just be able to pull all of that out. I just find I have some fraying that shows through sometimes. So just tidy it all up a bit. That's looking really, really cute. So we're ready to close up the opening in the lining that we have here. So you can just tug on that and pull those edges together, making sure that the raw edges are tucked down inside. Sometimes I like to give that a little bit of a press just to get that all to sit nice and flat. Now you can either hand sew this up, or you can take it to the sewing machine and top stitch it. And the other thing that I'm going to be doing is when I push this lining back down inside, I'm going to top stitch around the top edge about 1/8 of an inch away from the top edge of the drawstring, and that's just going to hold the lining down inside nice and snugly and just get everything to sit nice and flat down in there. So just give it all a press, and if you've got a little iron like me, this is a lot easier because you can fit the iron down inside the bag. So now we're ready to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to close up the opening in the lining here, and I'm also going to top stitch the lining down inside here by sewing along the top edge here. So now the little sachet is basically done. We're ready to thread the drawstring through the casing. So I like to just use a safety pin for this. So we're going to take the first length of drawstring and thread it through the large opening on the bottom, going one direction, and just feed that through till it pops out the other side. Then pull through a good length of that, and then we're going to continue without twisting it to go through the second casing. Pull that out the other side and do the safety pin. And I'm going to line them up together and knot these two ends. Just work that knot down towards the end. Okay, so that's our first side done. So now grab your second length of drawstring. Now we're going to go in the opposite side, so wherever the tails are coming out, we're going to go back in the opposite side and feed that through. So line up your ends, do your best to make sure things are not twisted. Might actually give that a little bit of a press because it's a little bit. And knot those two ends together. So there we go. This is your baby cathedral sachet all finished. The very last thing that I like to do is press a little bit of shape back into the bag. So if you're happy with your bag being a little bit floppy like this, then that's all fine. But I like to give mine just a little bit of shape. So I reach down and push the lining right down in there. And I'm going to fold that box corner, give that a little bit of a press. The same for the other one. And then I'm actually going to fold between the 2 points of the box corner. So fold that parallel between that. And then on the other side. And this is just going to give the bag a little bit more of a box shape and just help it stand up a little bit more on its own. So there you can see, it stands up very nicely. So then you can cinch it in. You can see what an adorable little baby cathedral sachet you've made. And if you have sewn along with me, you can be so proud of yourself. I'd love to see what you have been making, so make sure you tag me on social media at Arabesque Scissors using baby cathedral sachet. Thanks for watching.